So my name is Merlin Crossley. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Academic and Student Life. I'm going to introduce the lecture, and then Professor Rawdon Wilkinson, Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Education and the Student Experience, will wrap up the questions. So I love these lectures. We have such a wonderful array of talent at UNSW. We have some superb teachers, and these lectures are an opportunity for us all to get together, to listen, to learn, and to put things in the chat. So do put things in the chat and then ask questions afterwards. I should say this lecture is being recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, don't put things in the chat and don't put your camera on. So let me begin also by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land. I'm actually on Gadigal, boundary of Gadigal and Wongal land. I talked to Megan Davis about acknowledgements of country. She says you should always try to do something meaningful. And I was walking around today and I was thinking about the sense of place, which is very important to Indigenous people, the sense of community. But in this lecture, I thought to myself, the Indigenous cultures have a really good tradition of learning and passing on knowledge through stories and narratives. And I thought to myself, that's probably the most relevant thing to say today. So I want to introduce our two speakers, Isabella Dobrescu and Alberto Motta. I can't remember exactly when you were appointed, but my goodness, I'm so delighted that you're both with us at UNSW. You came to my attention because you've won almost every teaching award that it is possible to win. You chair the Step Up initiative. That's won President's Award for Building Collaborations. It was awarded actually the Wharton Business School International Gold Medal. You've won Australian Government Office on Learning and Teaching citations for outstanding contributions to student learning. You've won multiple faculty and university awards for your teaching, including the Heinz Harrod Award. And also, I know that your students, Richard Buckland used to collect thank you cards where students would thank the teachers who'd inspired them, and your names came up again and again. I know that the students really appreciate the work you do. I know how innovative you've been in your co-founders of unpaid co-founders and co-chiefs of Lionheart Studios, which does gamification and electronic teaching. And what you're working on is trying to solve this problem of doing excellent teaching at scale. And it's an absolutely sensational thing if you can pull that off. And so far, you've had great success. In your other work, I notice, Isabella, you're interested in the economics of aging. And so again, you're being really careful in the judgment of what you work on, because that's a huge issue for our times with an aging population. And Alberto, you work on organizational design and trying to ensure that companies and things can avoid corruption. And I think, these are, again, those are enormously important things. And it's terrific that we've got people who are working on important problems, working on teaching, set an example, and engaging with the community. So I'll stop there. I'll hand over to you. I'll put myself on mute. I'll start multitasking. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you, Merlin. Thanks a lot for the very kind words. We're having, and we've had for the past decade, had a great time with UNSW. We're really enjoying, as you can see, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I know that with the end of the term and exams and the lockdown and young families or not so young families but working from home a little bit, all this has created a little bit of a perfect storm. So thanks for taking time from your day to join us, and hopefully we're gonna have some fun. That was the whole point of the discussion today while we're doing this. Now, well, why are we doing this? Whenever Alberto and I started thinking about what we wanted to talk to you about today, what we wanted to talk with you today, this whole theme of Matrix Reloaded really came back and back. And if I'm being honest, I don't know which pill we got, the blue one or the red one, or maybe both of them. But this seems to be like a very adequate title for what's, the world we live in currently. So here we go, Education Reloaded.
Yes, you probably have heard a lot people saying, oh, we are gonna reinvent education. We are gonna drastically change the way we learn. And if you think about it, that's not always the case. It's hard to find good examples where we had real innovation, revolution in the learning and teaching. If you look at the history, it's actually kind of funny. In 1728, people were so excited by the idea that we can actually send lessons to people through the postal service and essentially reach everyone and change the way education works. In 1858, University of London started what Charles Dickens called the People's University. You don't need to be a full-time student on campus. We are just going to send to your home via the postal service this lecture, and this will change the world. It will change the way you learn forever.
I did change it for Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela used that system, so I mean, I'm not throwing stones here, but certainly maybe not the revolution we were expecting. And then in the 1920s, someone says, "Hey, wait a second, we can use radio broadcasts to do the same, so we can reach everyone at scale, and that's going to change education again." In 1956. In Chicago, they went even further and they started doing television classes. And the idea was, oh my God, this is going to be it. This is going to be it. Even further, we started having accredited virtual universities using television as a way to reach people. And by 2003, a lot of people were actually engaging in distance learning of this type. And that continued to grow in 2006. And in 2012, elite universities, Stanford, Harvard, MIT, UNSW, they just got wind of the next big thing, which is, wait, we had the postal service, we had the radio, we had the television, but now we have the internet. So we're going to change the world using this new type of approach. And MOOCs came in at this point as the big game changer. And of course, in 2021, we have learned that distance learning is becoming very commonplace, the only learning. And our heart goes out to you guys. Maybe it was a bit traumatic, but it was certainly a trend, right, that we were on. But is this really, really changing the way we are learning, or is it just a slight revision of the system we are using to deliver the content?
Well, let's think about what Alberto said for a second, right? What all these interventions, the post and the radio and the TV and the internet have in common, delivering courses through these environments. Well, it's sort of always the case that you have the teacher, the educator in the driving seat, right? And yes, the shape of the wheel, the color of the wheel has evolved over time. Has definitely changed. So we went from traditional learning to more adventurous learning. This is the driving wheel of a Tesla. So we are there, but again, it's a driving wheel. We still have the driving wheel. There's still the teacher there to ensure that the content is delivered with a certain structure, with a certain timing to certain people. So what we would like to actually have a chat with you today about and see what you think about is, what's the next big leap in this sequence? Here's what we're proposing: the driverless car.
There is no steering wheel.
No more.
No more.
No more steering wheel. Now, the next question is, how fast are we going to crash? And we're here to actually try to, not to convince you, but to tell you what have we found when we courageously and slightly crazily did this, and see what you guys basically think about. So here's our approach of the driverless car. We wanted to go from something like this, and I'm going to dissect it in a second, to something like this. Now, the one thing that changed between these slides is that little green person moved right under the microscope. So what do we mean by that? I mean, think about how this knowledge creation is coming into being, right? You have a thinker, you have a researcher that searches for this knowledge, and searches and researches, and then it creates this knowledge. And then what? Well, then they write a paper, or a stone plaque or something back in the day. And they write the article. The article is submitted. It withstands public scrutiny through, a tough but fair editorial process to be published in journals. And then all this knowledge gets translated into normal language in textbooks. And then textbooks get condensed into notes, lecture notes. And then we lovingly pass these lecture notes to our students together with what we call the university experience, which is a rich ecosystem of classes with lecturers, tutors, demonstrators, facilities, student center, answering questions about special consideration. Again, we are at the end of the term.
Too soon. It's too soon.
It's too soon, probably. But anyway, so think about this one. Now take this sequence and let's try to think about changing the roles. And changing the roles such that now a learner, a student, it's indistinguishable from a researcher. What does this do effectively? Is just putting the student in the driving seat. And then suspend disbelief for a second. But the benefit of this is that it's nice to say words like empower and so on, but at the end of the day, it literally gives the student ownership over their own learning journey. So, if you think about how research is conducted, we want actually the same from our students. Okay, this seems tough. But let's break it down. Think about research activity, right? How do we do our research? What's involved in us doing? What are the features of research activity? Okay, it's creative, engaging, exciting. Well, these are all words, terms that we would like to, hear our students saying about our courses. Oh, this course has been creative, it's been engaging, it's been exciting to sit in and listen and, absorb all this knowledge. It's community driven via the peer review system. It is in every discipline, in every field, there is people creating a certain literature, right? Well, this is again something that we want in our courses, right? We want to develop the sense of engagement that then leads to a sense of belonging, a sense that I care where I am and I care how I contribute and I'm proud to be part of this community. So again, second bullet point or line, we want in our courses. The more people involved, the better the outcome. This is definitely something we want in our classes because, we had, I think pre-COVID, we had an understanding of what large classes were, and then COVID came around. And I think the whole definition of large classes just got through out of so COVID really put the large in large classes into perspective. Now on the downside, so, again, something that we want. On the downside of research activity features, takes decades. It's a labor of love, but it's laborious to distraction. Takes crazy preparation, which again, takes a lot of time, and rigor. Okay, well, it takes rigor. It's something that, again, we do want in our classes. So, can we make it? Is it feasible to want to have all these things? So we want to have them, but can we make it? So
yeah, the objective here is essentially to take the role of a student and get it as close as possible to the role of a researcher, and see if we can, even in a provocative way, let me say, can students behave engage in the kind of activities that you would expect academics to engage with. And this will be a tale, this presentation will be a tale of 6 randomized controlled trials that Isabella and I performed. It's very easy nowadays to explain what a randomized controlled trial is, because everybody can think of COVID and people testing a vaccine using a treatment and a placebo and then comparing the effectiveness. That's the approach that we're using here, which is the gold standard for research, which allows us essentially to do innovation in our classes, but also learn generalizable lessons that go beyond our classes and our students and can be applied more broadly outside of them. This was our philosophy from the beginning: do teaching innovation, but also have that more global impact. And also a tale of creating a massive multiplayer online game, which is, I think, an ingredient that we really needed to achieve this goal. First, provocative bombshell for you guys is this one. Can students substitute academics in some of the functions that academics perform? The answer is yes. We ran this intervention, what we call wisdom of the crowd, putting together students and getting their opinion and comparing that with one of professional staff really brought about some crazy results that we didn't even think were possible. It turns out that students are as precise as professional staff in marking and grading short answer questions. And I'm not just talking about numerical thing. I'm talking about long essay questions that are very intricate and complex. Also, students are just as useful as professional staff in providing feedback through this marking. And this is measured in the impact that this has in the final exam for students. So they are just as precise in group as professional staff, and just as useful in terms of helping other students learn in view of the final exam.
And to actually show you that this is the case, here's a plot. And if you by any chance are squinting at this plot, that's actually a good thing. So the red line is the professional markers, our tutors, and the blue line is the students. And if you look closely, like really closely, you see that there is a small difference between them, but that difference is not statistically significant. So when you look at students and tutors providing feedback, evaluating the answers of these complex questions, they're exactly as good within some statistical range. So squinting is good. Can academics substitute students? This is a fun question. The answer is no. Why? Well, consider the T2 2020 course when we launched this. We had about 3,600 pieces of feedback provided by tutors. We had 120,000 pieces of feedback provided by students. So, you know, in terms of funding, there's no way I could have gone to our head of school and say, hey, how about you give us 350,000? That's about how much would have costed for that feedback to be produced by professional staff. So that wasn't the case. But what did the student get? Well, the student actually, throughout the term, in each and every day of the term, they actually got one piece of feedback on average every 3 to 4 hours. That's different compared to waiting for the result of a quiz that is happening in week 3 or 4 or, you know, twice a term.
In other implications of this intervention is that you can see that the amount and the frequency of feedback that the students received was crazy, very quick. And this gets better and better if you have larger courses. This wisdom of the crowd gets better the more students you have. So you end up with large courses now being actually more effective than small one, hands down better. And students in this process, they learn exactly like academics do. They review other people's work, like when you receive a referee report from an editor. They also have their own work scrutinized by multiple referees that can have very different opinions. But in that variation of the opinion, there is a lot of learning going on and a lot of creativity that is unleashed. And also they learn from comparing their own referee reports with the referee reports of others. I mean, that's my favorite part when I do a referee report for a journal, when I can hear the opinion of the other referees that have reviewed that piece of work and compare with what I came up with. And of course, there is the overarching guidance of the editor, which in our context, AKA, is the lecturer in charge. As you can see, we developed this, we made a custom platform for this because it needs to be designed right. But when you design it right, you really bring the student experience a step closer to what an academic would experience as they would be doing research. And with this one, I am gonna tick in green that we can create a community-driven, at-scale peer review system where the more people involved, the better the outcome. One step closer to the future of research activity.
Now, how about the first box? Creative, engaging, exciting. Okay, we're going to take each and every one of these words and show you what we found. So on the exciting side, well, as probably most of you know, we have created this PlayEconomic video game. Now, this is not like a video game. This is a proper, massive multiplayer online video game covering principles of economics. That's, you know, several courses in the School of Economics from beginning to end. There is no cutting corners. And the first time we released it, it was absolutely voluntary. What did we find? We said, well, you know, this is on top of everything that people would do. It's not going to be picked up. It has been picked up, and by everybody, really. And then we said, well, you know, we're not attaching any marks, so surely it's not going to really do much. It does. The effect has been an increase in academic performance understood as grades in the exam, and the exam obviously had nothing to do with the video game. There were no video game scenarios part of the exam questions, completely disjointed, by 9 to 10%. So academic performance goes up by 9 to 10%, and that's great. One interesting thing further was that actually changed preferences towards the degrees. So we've seen that people who were undecided actually decided to join an economic degree and did very good in it by a significant percentage. Okay, so fun works, but pure mindless fun next to teaching content. So one thing is fun inside the teaching content. How about fun outside the teaching content? And by this, we mean giving a token like a balloon or a giant banana as a token that because you've done well in the course. Well, it turns out this one also can boost outcomes considerably for women who, you know, for some reason they feel they can do, attach more value to this, and they feel they can do better in the course, but not for men. For men, it actually kind of acts like a distraction. Multitasking problem much.
We might have. So just to summarize these two things, we know that through this intervention, we can make content work like a video game. And this second intervention here is pushing that even further and say, how about I put pure mindless fun next to the teaching content, right? Nothing educational, just pure mindless fun, almost like you can access Facebook or you can access Netflix while you are learning. And it's so funny. This is good for women. Women manage apparently to multitask, and the enjoyment translates into much better performance. But men, oh my God, they get distracted. They just get distracted.
That's exactly our reaction when we saw the results.
And they are, I mean, for women, it's like being taught in a much smaller class by much better teachers.
So this is about, you know, it's equivalent to reducing a class size by 20%, or being taught by a lecturer that is 2 standard deviations above an average quality lecture. So like a really good
or having
teacher.
Intensive tutorials, personalized tutorials. The effect of fun can be as strong for women, but the opposite applies for men. So
use with caution.
Use with caution.
or maybe not
don't
use.
Maybe don't use
maybe
it.
Not
don't use it. I mean, boys need to be helped.
All right, so going to engagement, right? We had exciting engagement. One of the, video game lessons on engagement is through these leaderboards, video game-like leaderboards. Sorry. So we've implemented some in the game, and what we found was that, again, it can boost learning considerably to the extent of being taught by someone that is massively better, a teacher that is massively better. But interestingly, that creates a good study habit that also translates into higher academic performance next term. So the competitive gene, once triggered, tends to stay with you, and then off you go. Now, we've used this in the fifth study that we're talking about today to actually avoid demoralization effect for low performance. So there's a huge literature on this, and the problem with providing relative performance information when you get back the results from a quiz in week 3 or 4, it's hard to, and you've not done particularly well. There is a strong, and it's uncontroversial, there is a strong demoralization effect for low performance. So you sort of throw in the towel. We find that with leaderboards, probably because it has this real time feedback component to it. Like, I'm doing well, and I see immediately that I'm doing well in real time, or I'm struggling a little bit, and I can see where I'm struggling a little bit, so I climb back up. So maybe because of this real-time effect, we managed to wipe out the demoralization effects for low performers. But of course, it does come at the cost of some of the high performers who are getting very, very happy about how well they're doing, and it triggers the resting on the laurel effect.
So use leaderboards with caution, because
again,
if you let them, they will end up distorting the effort in a way that is too specific and that goes against the learning outcomes that we want.
And finally, all this engagement, does it matter? Well, we've attached the video game achievement, we've awarded micro-credentials for video game achievements, whether they're linked to leaderboards or whether they're linked to performance in general. And again, the findings on this has been hit and miss. Micro-accreditation badges work and they don't work. So in order to be, completely agnostic, we said, we're going to stack the cards against micro-accreditations. We're going to give it to year 1 students. These guys have another 3 years to go until they hit labor market. They're probably not going to matter what you did in micro 1 in your first term at UNSW. And we find something very interesting. They're not using it for the labor market, but still they go for them. And in doing so, they actually solve the hardest problem. They go straight for the hardest problems in the assessment. And the way they solve it is no more, trial and error. You see that the time between actions is increasing. So they pause, they think about it, they go in once, and they go for the kill. They usually get it right. So there is less of this trial and error and more working smarter, exactly like it is. So creative, yes. Engaging, yes. Exciting.
We have ticked another box of this type of feeling, this type of emotional connection to the learning experience that we wanted to achieve. Yes, it can be made as fun as playing a video game. So can education be as fun as Super Mario, or fun as another entertainment activity like Netflix? The answer is yes. We see students saying, I'm addicted to this video game that you have created. We see students saying, this is the best video game we have ever played.
It's not a video game.
It's
your
a course. But blending this in the minds of students is possible, and it's good educationally. And a lot of the tools in the video game that the video game industry has developed can be used in academia with a grain of salt for good results. Now, here comes the cold shower. This is the cliffhanger of this presentation. We are holding by 2 fingers, because when we said we want learners to act like researchers, we know that research takes decades, crazy preparation and rigor. How can you get students to that level of engagement when you don't have 20 years to prepare them for that kind of research activity. This is where maybe our dream of reinventing education ends. But however, we have a solution for that as well. We develop what is called in the video game industry a massive multiplayer online game. And the idea is with this tool, we can make research activities easy, intuitive, and fun, really simple. Take a complex thing that would take years to familiarize with and transform it into a tool that can achieve that much faster. That's how it looks like. In a massive multiplayer online game, you control your avatar and you explore the world, but you also play with other students. You are immersed in a society with them. And with them, you build cities, you build productive activities, companies, organizations. And that becomes entire regions or countries that you are building with them. And in fact, in this massive multiplayer game, we even have multiple planets where we put our students in as part of the learning experience. And if you're thinking, well, Alberto, you told us about the history of distance learning and how it's repeating itself. This doesn't look very different from other simulations. So what is the innovation here? What is the twist? Well, in this particular simulation, students can create their own models. So it's not a simulation where we set up some economic or business type of model or algorithm that the students are trapped in. This is truly a sandbox. There is no assumption here. It's all behavioral. It comes from the behavior and the actions of the students. They can create their own model that can have PhD level complexity, but they do that without any jargon or any math. That is all gone. And they can build a model in minutes. And of course, this can be extended to other disciplines. We are already working on engineering and medicine to actually build that into the same massive multiplayer online world. As part of this world, students create content. They create artificial intelligence that can proliferate in the simulated world. It's kind of a natural selection of ideas where best decision making and artificial intelligence, they thrive and they proliferate in the world and in the universe. This means that every action that the student takes adds to the experience of everyone else. This is important for us. We want the more students, the better engagement. And in order to do that, you have to make students creating value for other people as they perform the activity in the game. This is also different from other simulations because it never stops. It is persistent. And I'm looking at Isabella because having a simulation that never stops, if you think about it, having an assessment that never stops, she's coughing out of stress now, can be a bit overwhelming. But it's certainly what we are achieving here. We can involve millions of learners sharing the same virtual universe. We are not breaking them down into smaller groups. This is truly the same place, the same universe for millions of potential learners across courses, universities, and subjects. It's similar in scope to only maybe one other massive multiplayer online game out there, which is EVE Online, where everyone is actually part of one shred, one server shred, sharing all that space. Of course, because this simulation, in fact, simulates worlds with infinite opportunity for counterfactual experiment, this is also a platform for students to learn how to run lab experiments. And what we want to achieve here and what we achieved at this point is that when students create these counterfactual and these experimentations, the type and quality of the content, it's easy for them to produce, but it would turn an academic's head with the academic thinking, actually, that experiment that student just created could be a paper, could be an article, and that's the link. You can easily produce PhD level content that turns the academic's head and makes them think, Oh, actually, that could be published with a little work and a little bit of effort.
And this actually happened to us just recently because we deployed the government intervention model. Government intervention is a typical chapter everybody is teaching in Micro 101. And you know, we actually stumbled upon this question. If you wanted to know whether a randomly selected woman can actually be a better leader or a worse leader compared to a man. The answer is that actually men and women are randomly selected. So this is not, we're not talking about the role model, right? We're not talking exceptional individuals on either side. This is a random female student and a random male student. And the answer is that men and women actually perform similarly in their leadership positions. Their economies, their societies are thriving in a similar way. It doesn't seem to be any distinguishable difference between them. But the female students who know that another female student is in charge actually perform better. They study harder and they achieved more. Nothing happening for male. Male are completely unfazed by either a male leader or a female leader. But there is, you know, and again, there's this idea, it's not related to the role model. This is just simply representation, if you want. Me knowing that someone like me is in charge, above and beyond, you know, what the abilities are, actually encourages me to do better. And we really like the study.
And that was a bonus, just an example of something that comes out of these massive simulations that can be published in top journals and that a student could have developed and created, really closing that gap. And with this, we double tick that column because the video game adds to the engaging and exciting aspect of the community-driven approach to teaching. A community of people that build knowledge on each other's work towards the goal of creating content, not just being passive recipient, but actually creating content, building on the shoulders of the giants, if you want. And we have also eliminated the last part, which was the difficult one, where the hurdle, right, that makes research difficult for a student to tackle by building tools around it. That can really, you know, change the way we learn. The way in which we design assessments in the massive multiplayer online game, the feel, the type of mental process that goes into the assessment creation and how they do the assessment in action, it is a completely different thing relative to a short answer question or a multiple choice question. It's just a different part of your brain is engaged.
We should have kept rigor though.
We should have kept rigor. It is very rigorous.
It actually does maintain academic rigor.
Yes.
So,
and that's it from us.
We're a little bit early, but we're actually very excited to know what you guys think and yeah, have a chat with you.
Yeah, it was a lot of ground to cover, so I hope this was not too much of an information dump.
And sorry for the coffee.
Yes.
Look, you two are fantastic. That was amazing. Every time I talk with you two about the work that you do, I come away so excited, and I know everybody else will feel that way. We have a whole lineup of questions, which I'll come to in a moment, but I'm always very impressed with how you ride across different academic disciplines, consciously and unconsciously, in the way that you present your insights. You know, I always have English literature and drama in my mind's eye when you're talking, because of the use of fiction as a place to play and to explore different things that you can really drive in your work, you know, and Isabella Grun's Left Hand of Darkness is always there, thinking about gender fluidity and how you can just play outside of those boxes and get insights from that. So I'm going to begin with some questions. I'm going to really try and resist my temptation to want to ask you a whole series of my questions, but I can't promise you I'll be totally successful. I'll start with a question from Merlin. Merlin wants to know about whether there's a regression to the mean in Wisdom of the Crowds.
Whether there's a regression to the mean?
Yeah, in the wisdom, no, we don't observe that. But we cannot talk about it in detail, but there are like 10 or 15 mechanisms for this to work. So there is a dispute system, penalties and rewards. It is very complex, actually. It's not just your Moodle peer marking system. It has to be, I mean, think of like Netflix. I mean, streaming was there before, right? And also home deliveries were there before. But then with Uber Eats and with Uber and then with Netflix, the technology was ready enough for us to build these complex servers and quick internet to get that process really quick and the design tied up. So if you design it very carefully, you can avoid that. I would love to talk more about it, but I think it will take 30 minutes just to flesh out exactly how that works.
Maybe we don't do it now. I think, yeah, if I can just add to that, one key thing is how open you need to keep the system, how it cannot be just a two-way street. It needs to be two ways several times, almost in real time. So it needs to feel like a community. You know, it's you talk, I answer, you talk again, I answer. There needs to be this constant flow across people with various roles and various expertise and various backgrounds and strengths.
Okay. I cannot resist. Sorry, Merlin, I cannot resist. I have to answer. So one important trick is you learn very quickly at the beginning, using all this information through the video game and through the system, who is good. And then you are always careful to include a good student. I mean, the good students are amazing. If you put them into the process, they will spot if the crowd is not working very well. And they feel so strongly about it that they raise their hand and say, I want to dispute this and dispute that and dispute. And you give them a reward. And every time they dispute successfully, more rewards. And they're like, oh my God, I'm a genius. And they keep on going. You just need 5% to be at that level. And you bring everyone up to their level. So, but it is complicated.
But without pushing, it just happens naturally.
Fantastic, thank you. So let me turn to Jackie Cranny's questions. Jackie's got a really good question I think we're all interested in, and that's, you've shown us a lot about how students can learn from this. So, but how can researchers learn? What are the big insights there?
So there are, I think, two layers in which you can think about this. You can easily randomize treatments within the system, like we did when we were evaluating if it works, if it affects final exam marks well. And this is like the education literature, if you want, where you are essentially making interventions where you tweak, you do A/B testing, and you see what works. And because this is such an intense treatment, they live inside the simulation, they live inside this academia system, you can get huge treatment effects that you usually don't find in the literature because of how immersive and intense this system and this environment is. You can study things like who is a better leader in group work, or is this leaderboard gonna work, and a bunch of other questions that it would be hard to answer at scale if you had to run randomized controlled trials each and every time outside of the platform. The other thing is you can use the platform itself as a simulated world. So this is where the platform becomes a lab experiment. Now, the external validity of that, it's a little tricky. You need to demonstrate that what happens in the simulated world is close enough to reality that you can do experiment that, you know, in social science or medicine or engineering, that would make sense. Like, for example, what the behavior of people would be if we change the way people communicate, or if we change the type of information we provide to people. The political system we have, is democracy better than random selection of leaders, right? All these questions you can tackle in a way that you cannot in the real world, but at the cost, of course, of external validity. Is like assessing a model, if you want, and try to tease out important channels through the simulation itself. But you have to be careful that some of this, you know, need some proper external validity analysis.
Thanks, Alberto. Thanks, Isabella. So it's a perfect time to turn to Ian Kwan's question, which is to ask you about examples of games. I mean, you showed some great screenshots of the games that that you've played with students, and I know quite a lot about those, but others don't. So perhaps you could explore exactly what the games are that you play, but also others that others play. And also, I think it might be useful to think about the mega games as well that you're also engaged with.
Sounds good. I might jump into this. What do you think? So think of the game as like a blank canvas. We are not imposing any assumption. We are not saying that's how demand and supply works, that's how a business operates. We are not saying that's how the government or how people interact. That is entirely up to the player. It's the result of individual choices that build up the outcomes that we see in society: criminality, the legal system, it's a democracy, or is it a different form of government? What is the GDP? All of this is emergent from the game. That was really important for us. We don't want to trick people into buying assumptions that are hidden under the hood. It's a complete behavioral game. At the same time, people can very easily create their own artificial intelligence, where instead of playing the game all the time, which would be very time consuming, and we don't want that, because we know that students can spend countless hours on this game, and that's not the objective here. So they can create artificial intelligence. They can say, let my agent behave like this in this type of situation, which then allows for asynchronous gameplay as well. You don't need to be playing always at the same time. You can set up the strategy for your character and let it loose in the world. And because we are selecting artificial intelligence that has a highest survival chance, you could really see these good ideas or behavior proliferating in the world. It's a huge social experiment about what behavior ends up being naturally selected. And you see, a student just puts that into play by setting up a few rules for his character and then leaving the game, just watching it. It's a spectator game just as much as is an active multiplayer game, and it doesn't necessarily have to take a huge amount of time to engage with.
In fact, it doesn't.
I hope, Roland, this is somewhat targeting the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great answer. I think it might be useful to just draw parallels with other games that other people might know out there, that your simulations are based on, things like SimCity, Minecraft, and that kind of stuff, and also things we've talked about this before, Plague and other games like that. So let's move on, because Lindy Klein's got a really important question, and it's one that always goes through, I think, my mind when we talk, and that is, how do we help other researchers and other teachers use this in their own courses? Because if you take it beyond some of the things that we've talked about, it can feel quite intimidating. How do other people in other areas really use this in their teaching? Any thoughts there?
Do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, we've created this to be easy. It's meant to help rather than hinder. And all in all our time at UNSW, we've always been involved in courses that had 1,000 and above students, and there's only been the two of us. So to the extent to which we had to handle that, we had to have technology really helping, not creating more problems. So, the one issue that we had was on this short answer, and this is how, the model that we show, the wisdom of the crowd, the part of the platform for which we show the wisdom of the crowd was born, because it's impossible to man up and give students feedback to the level to which not only they want, but to the level to which it's actually making a difference on the spot, in real time. You have to give them, I mean, fair enough, exams are about assessing what you've learned and whatever, but during the term it has to be, or sometimes it has to be, about the learning curve, right? We have to give them the chance to come together and really take off. So we had to create the system to be actually, on the one side, as I said, very open, and a highway with tons of lanes, because it cannot feel restrictive, not at the speed at which feedback is happening. And on the other hand, simple enough for us to manage.
In fact, if you think about our conundrum, Rorden, was we have all these stories, artifacts coming from the game, and we want to ask deep questions about them and make projects about them. But then we don't have the ability to mark something like that. We know that when we were talking with other lecturers, they were saying, this is awesome, but I cannot do it. It's too much work.
There's no time.
So the academia wisdom of the crowd was also created in part to address that. The other important thing is that we have franchised the platform to other lecturers and see how they interacted with it. And in practice, students are catching up so much faster than a lecturer ever can. So our effort has been since then to build tools to achieve two things. One, this has to be something that works on its own. Academia and the game produces content, the content is edited and cleaned up without with QA, without the lecturer having to do anything. That's really important, because if we break this, nobody's going to use it ever. The other thing that we are working on right now is to create simple tools for the lecturer to create scenarios and models and keep track of the game, so that they can actually have a more active role inside of it. And that's maybe an open challenge. We would love to hear from people and just collaborate more and explore what could be done in this area. But let me tell you for sure, students are so used to this type of medium that they catch up so much faster than we do. That's pretty impressive.
That's the hard bit, though, isn't it? Making sure that we're up to speed with what our students are able to do when we use these kinds of techniques. John's got a really interesting question here, Don Shepherd. He wants to know, can students hide in the crowd?
Okay, so actually we want, so this is again, going at Merlin's question, how does this work? Wisdom of the crowd works only if it's anonymous. If people starts communicating with each other, like, and there is any hint of social pressure, like, oh, Isabella thinks that the answer is A. Maybe it's A. So as soon as you do that, you break the whole system. It collapses like a house of cards. So in a sense, even the game content creation has to be anonymous. But we have never felt that this came as cold or distant from. So students never, if you look at the teaching evaluation, they never say this made me feel alone and detached, because you are immersed into these opinions, content creation. You see the artifact, you don't see the creator, and it seems to be work fine.
It does, because the comments are personal. Nobody cares about
the
name, right, of the person providing, but they do care that you read my question. I care about you reading my question, not a question, my answer, and providing feedback to me. So all of a sudden it feels personal without the need for,
shaking hands. Which is also how corruption starts, by the way. It's just
you should know something about it.
Thank you. That's a great answer, and a lovely mischievous question from John. Susie Longstaff's put a question on the chat that I think is a really interesting one, and it's about students' perceptions of being involved in the grading process themselves. How do you guard against anxieties that students may have that you're actually farming out the task of grading to them, and not taking responsibility for that?
So I think when you think of the editorial process, right, you are reviewing an article for a journal, but there is always the editor there that is moderating and is taking things into its own hands. And the system is such that at every step of the way, both in the video game and also in the wisdom of the crowd system, you can always have a direct line with a click with the lecturer, with the editor. Very important, we had iterations of this. If you hide the button, right, or if the button is far away from where they look, that's bad. You have to have that channel 1 millisecond away. As soon as they have any doubt about what's happening with the crowd, what's happening, am I really learning the right thing, am I being farmed out, they have that direct immediate channel. It's not something that can be hidden, or this is not a trick. We are actually freeing up resources to give them more content, more feedback. And I think from our teaching evaluations, we never heard anyone saying in the latest iteration of this, never anyone saying, well, this is a cheap trick, because they get so much out of it, and they have this immediate ability to flag problems that in the end, it doesn't materialize, but it's in the details, right? If someone takes this idea and implement it a little bit different, and people have the slight feel that this is not trustworthy, they are trying to save money, as soon as they feel something like that, the whole house of cards crumbles down. So implementation and execution is paramount.
But we also have to give them credit. I mean, I think students are way more aware of what's going on than what we think they are. And way more trustworthy and way more, ready actually to take charge of their learning experience, provided they feel that the learning experience is of a certain quality. So it's like Alberto said, we never, had any feeling from anyone, let alone comments, that we were cutting corner on, oh, you're getting us to do your job. Also because they are aware that there is no way in a course of 1,000 students that I can provide every 3 hours a piece of feedback to everybody constantly for 70 days.
And if you think of professional communication, when you have to tell someone, oh, your answer is wrong, and try to find the right words, even that is subject to the invigilation of this editor. That is a skill that they just cannot learn in any other way. I mean, they need to communicate with peers and tell them you were wrong, using the right constructive words, and that type of process is very different. It just cannot be done vertically. If you have a vertical structure with the lecturer on top, you just don't ever get that chance of experimenting with that language and
building that skill, which we shouldn't leave until year 3, when people actually go on the job market and then they don't know how to talk to their boss. I mean, it's something that we have to train. It's our job, right? It's our responsibility also to train them in how to express an opinion and how to argue for their point of view. I mean, I think this is also one of the reasons why this works, because at least in economics, it's all in the assumptions, right? If the model can be the same, but you change the assumptions and the answer is going to be different. So these are indeed open assessments in which you have to be able to articulate what are your assumptions and how did you get from A to B, and someone else gets from C to D using the same model, and there's richness in that, a richness that we could not provide. So as Alberto said, provided that we're always there to ensure that this is of a certain quality, there is a little bit of magic happening.
You cannot have a journal without an editor, right? And that editor has to be respected. That's, I think, the bottom line.
Thank you. So we've got time for one more question, which is actually, it's almost as if we'd planned this, because Jess has got a really interesting question about ethics that we'll come to in a moment. But one of the most powerful things of what you've said today is about the idea of learning game, that students get so much feedback almost in real time that they're able to drive their learning game forward, which is a really amazing thing. So in answer to Susie's question, we started talking about whether students were being shortchanged in this, and Josh's question is a natural follow-up from that. He's asking, are there any ethical considerations which need to be considered when teaching but using this approach? And he has in mind here both in terms of the duties to students and the behaviour of students in the games and the learning outcomes. I mean, this is about part of your answer, I'm sure, is about the referee, the editor, but there are other elements to it.
The referee needs to...
Sorry, I muted you for a second. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, well, you're sorry.
I'm sorry.
The referee needs to be present. You cannot, the editor needs to be present. You cannot do without. Now, we had the same concerns, especially since it's all anonymous, right? So how do you deal with that? And, fortunately, so far, and we've run this with several thousands people creating probably roughly 1 million comments. There hasn't been one that has been offensive, or there is a button, of course, there's a button for everything.
There is a button.
There has to be a button for everything. And one of those is, flag it if you think that the content is, not only if you think that the content it's inappropriate, but even if it affects you. So it might be a perception thing. It might be that we're all fine, but someone feels, and that should be taken into account. There hasn't been one instance in which we have identified, or we have had reports, and students report everything, as you know, of inappropriate or misuse of this. So as I said, I think we should really give credit to our students where credit is due.
Thank you, Isabella.
They're fantastic.
I'm so sorry, we've run out of time. It's 2:00, and it's such a perfect way to end. Thank you both. That was an outstanding presentation, as always. I feel excited by the intellectual content. I'm sure colleagues do. Nice to see you both. Nice to see everybody else. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for hosting this.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.